French much since I basically only have 12-year-olds debating. We tried to react. Saw that. The topic did not work. It worked in our favor there. I saw that.
But so it goes. Brendan and MJ, all good.
I get it down.
Yeah, sorry, give me 1 second.
No, that's all good. Just let me know. You good?
Yeah, I'm good whenever the room is.
You good for it?
Okay, I'm good.
I'm still.
Just let me know.
Yeah.
Good. Is anyone?
I'm good. My timer.
Yeah. I Cool. Anyone not ready? Plan. The United States federal government to substantially increase water protection in relevant areas of nuclear power in the United States. The advantages of nuclear power: first, water management causes reactor closures and increases power generation by incorporating integrated resource planning into water management, forces the industry to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Click it out. 21. Integrated resource planning integrates future needs and identifies the mixing needs to adequate focus on water resource constraints, the impact of climate on water availability, and the ability to generate power with insufficient power. Water prevent plants from operating water impact the total energy generation. Water will remain important for cooling nuclear plants. The AFSOL's first innovation, risking for policy for water protection is necessary for market predictability, operation assurance, and tech advancements. However, 29 directs the NRC to develop regulatory infrastructure to support commercialization of advanced reactors, current requirements, and require light water reactors. We're making the NRC to proposing that acting support technical licensing and regulation. This provides assurance of protection, regulatory stability, predictability, and clarity, establish regular environments to start to address the non-light water ticket. The NRC will not issue registration NRC stock when goes added to the docket. The blank cost retrofits and new tech development. Anderson et al. 19 retrofitting cost water reduce water costs by 90%. Even consumption increase. However, retrofits can be costly and to meet regulatory requirements. Hybrid systems are common and not feasible to convert to for something for dry water scarcity. Can be selling with small reactors can use the dry cooling and seconds investment. The plant standard won't give businesses a clear businesses the confidence to invest. They want to invest now, but won't without a clear, stable industry standard mandate. 20. The risk for nickel pencil growth due to confidence operating up the margin so saying single disruption. Leader retirement is a trouble because like horizon water quality rate efficiency effects of climate require regulators and operators to determine solutions. We have no standard by which this risk is being mitigated decisions about which reactors will be around or being made right now. There's no regulatory standard. Perception of unmanaged water stress shuts down nuclear viability and freezes investment. Will then 20 is warming conflict because of increases in nuclear capacity. The water may shut down as the even as the main increase water stress performances to investigate utilities companies that take resiliency seriously by 2030. 61.8% of nuclear fleet face high water stress. And scenario 1 is warming. First, only nuclear energy solves existential climate change. Transition is inevitable, and American promotion rebuilds the non-proliferation and quickly resolves the transition improvement. 19, we face existential threat from climate. Nuclear energy is the largest source of carbon-free energy by a huge margin. It has major will come from climate change, even if it is 100% Paris, so it will not come near 2 degrees renewable carbon capture efficiency where everyone but will not get to start making 2 degrees require doubling nuclear power contribution scale. The mountain is sounding enough without 21 here, but under state solutions are perfect for better option to form market time. For every reactor that shuts down, it should by 5.8 million. That equals an annual stadium with the gasoline on fire. And otherwise, plants closing causes an immediate default of fossil fuels. Exactly what you run from, you end up choosing Sankara. 21 shutting of deep casino, 46% increase in carbon intensive transition away from nuclear. And coal economy instead of decarbonized foundation of nuclear without nuclear. We've had no issues with fossil fuels possession is driven by outdated info. With this, then reduce the remains can be recycled and renewable products for the waste reliance on mining and not unique to nuclear. Climate change will trigger feedback loops causing quick extinction. Prefer peer reviewed climate models. 18 climate change is surge for civilizations. Co-op strategy, cost and associated culture, then culture of climate exacerbates scarcity, water systems for revival of nations, one of the destruction and disease, the ocean acidification driven by emissions, 20% of providing coming from oceans, and impacts on the side, fertile for go with industries, there are delays between CO2 and never CO2, reduce efficiency, which ecosystems, the cost of carbon warming, increased rate of which carbon release, shortage of production, which also losses, vegetation suppresses rainfall, force and ice could catch many off urban critical top load, and given water vapor, nice albedo feedback side, and the raw and reflective high side, drive temperatures, leading to more melting of vapor pressure, increase warming, given gas properties, and it's going to be Northland's greater access and double limits should be the greatest concern. I think it's something so two at the same time. We can look to be a catastrophic effect on intensified rainfall and old damage threats. Risk worldwide, temperature play a role in global wildfires. Temperatures that lead to massive importance as a global threat. It makes nuclear war inevitable in every region clear. 20 climate temperatures pushing one side over conversations with work and pandemic stress increased it's collapse over fighting over resources nuclear war up in Europe, the Pacific, and air apple impact calculation cognitively biased against climate impacts because you haven't experienced them and they're in the far future critical. 21. We've never experienced climate. What's the big deal? We act like climate apocalypse, looking to go in after the change. You must, if you shop someone doing an MRI, the prefrontal cortex disease, and we think about changes, such skills, childhood psychology, skills, time, prefrontal cortex stems. When you think about it, the future, we discount the future, the far future is worthless. More from the crisis experience record. I smell record heat, President fires and floods, absences, Brooklyn, facing emergency, facing beyond and habitable, the human game, maybe playing itself in. Scenario 2 is exports first. Russia and China weaponized dual use nuclear exports to establish spheres that influence and road non-proliferation efforts, reintegrating domestic output, reasserts U.S. leadership. Gaddy. 20 of American retreat from civilian nuclear revisions, power will nuclear science with that first implications for security, nuclear energy is utility for power, open declined U.S. nuclear construction and create opportunities for revisions, power security, aggressive expand nuclear collaborations for geopolitical gain, to display America's global partner, nuclear tech countries will depend on them for nuclear tech with representatives and leadership, U.S. coalition for control of nuclear competitive emerging, more authoritarian powers, left nuclear power, to project soft powers and come into the U.S. research leadership in the United Allies and a coalition of nuclear partners competing with Russia and China over China and Russia, the global international order was arranged under U.S. leadership and with new U.S. nuclear policy, great powers were U.S. influence nuclear tech into the U.S. Disengaged from nuclear power will signal America's abandonment, foundation for civil nuclear power. Russia and China leverage energy relationships as a tool of great power competition to carve out regional spheres of influence. That's all. 19. Great power from leverage energy relations to gain energy and multilateral order being challenged. Competition really limited and rapid tech play enough people and China Russia with strong competition, multilateral which is breaking value into regional systems and full balance power shifting get new tech work, new frontiers competition, new great powers that look to expand reach energy planes as a tool of extension of their genuine rivalry among great powers and African outpacing Russia and China's key establishing and enforce non-proliferation standards and prevent spheres of influence. 19 supplying nuclear energy has been critical for the U.S. to establish standards for non-proliferation and inspire and develop a country forge a relationship that is not easily dislodged, providing influence on partners and nuclear practices. Russia and China export for influence. If the U.S. has to compete with, it will see leadership on the non-proliferation. Russia and China will welcome nuclear markets through MOUs and agreements. U.S. competitiveness linked to a strong nuclear program without a plan. The U.S. supply will begin domestic projects to fight Russia and China with a robust supply and economies to scale that make them more competitive. We can regain leadership in nuclear energy. It's also to maintain the reactor fleet and its entrepreneurs to developing next gen tech and sphere of influence cause war with Russia and China and France. 20 secret over China. Russia would be a blueprint for competitive opposition spaces using Russia and China supremacy and using economic influence to draw countries into its overseers with the domains of coercion spheres. Their co-work consequences we want to coerce the possibilities of influence around sort of the avoiding the end of war. Ideology and great direct power to renegotiate market concessions to come into the order of fragile continuing gives the better position to realize ambitions and both Russia and China war cause extinction star 17 100 bombs with little power to cause block carbon economic rate for a decade or so sound like equities as lost physical types of strong drug systems 2 million tariffs from having that drug systems would be limited due to the vibration and conflict with Russia as well as China walking towards newborn allowing Russia and China to outcompete U.S. exports weakens non-proliferation balance. And then 20 U.S. exports fell in 36 Russia and China play a large role in U.S. without a reactor offer on the decrease of China to negotiate non-proliferation commitments by Chinese and Russians are weaker than the U.S. Foreign reactors are and this would decrease the ability of the U.S. to influence norms and re-establishing leadership prevents Russia and China from negotiating contracts with weak non-proliferation standards. DOE 20 re-establishing leadership with paramount competitiveness of the nuclear energy non-proliferation negotiations when nations are U.S. showing non-proliferation being sure Russia and China do not hold partners to the same standards and enabling countries and important without safeguards reducing efforts for robust nuclear safeguard. Nuclear proliferation causes nuclear war. Mad and rationality breakdown trending. 15 threats in war. Most states in possession greater probability more format and new states transition to like second China states believe has sensitivities for states with advantage to believe it has more Chinese field using rules and practices due to reciprocal fear. Surprise second one start war and believe that wars inevitable day and better destroy first and suffer attack and then suffer attack even in math there's worse deterrence as rational leaders there's no guarantee that will hold. That's 40 seconds. Yeah, okay. Domestic sector key to U.S. nuclear and Navy banks. 15. The civil nuclear sector is incredibly important to national interest for defense protecting the U.S. Navy and Navy benefits substantially from a robust domestic civil nuclear program and its supply chain. It provides post-military jobs to U.S. procurement efforts without Washington, but would need to build capacity solar for new national security and increase incentive for holding your demands and strong nuclear Navy key to check all global conflict escalation beam. 12. Naval reactors provide USA unmatched capability and flexibility to support missions all over the world that carries until time. Nuclear provide a technological warfighting edge that help global stability. Nuclear propulsion success executing missions around the globe.
I'll wait to start.
Yeah. There's some.
Okay, I just got them. I'm good with you.
I have So the plan says that you substantially increase water protection in relevant areas of nuclear power in the United States. What does the F do?
It increases protection of water that nuclear plants use. So it regulates the way that nuclear plants use water, how much they can output, the temperature they can output it at, how they can pollute the water, stuff like that.
Right. So it's this like integrated resource planning model that the Cook evidence talks about, right?
It's more like the Taproot evidence, which says that the problem now is that we have a tech-specific framework, i.e. like the nuclear reactors have to adopt this specific technology. The Taproot evidence says that we should expand it to a tech-inclusive framework that requires a certain level of protection that would then allow for kind of
And
innovation,
that
et cetera.
level of protection is about like the water intake for cooling.
It's, the water intake and the thermal pollution that results when you release the water.
Awesome. So I want to talk about like that sort of cooling scenario, the thermal like I guess release. All this like solvency evidence seems to indicate that like the problem is that there is not enough water, or that rising like I guess why does like this water scarcity that or climate change that the evidence talks about, like why does that harm the ability for nuclear plants to operate?
So there's a few reasons. First is that they don't have the technology to do it. The Anderson evidence says that when we retrofit, that the only way we're able to retrofit, we can reduce water withdrawals by 98%. But the only way we're able to do that is by imposing regulations on how much water they can use and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
The problem is that tech they don't have an incentive to move to that tech, which means they're using the water. The Taproot card says that, the Cook card talks about how future needs means that there's going to be future scarcity, which means plants will never be able to survive because of future climate scarcity of the water.
Okay, cool. So it's about scarcity of the water transcending plants. That sounds good. The export scenario. Countries are, I just want to make sure that I understand this area. Currently, countries are buying from Russia and China, right?
Yeah, the Gaddy card says that America is stepping back from the nuclear sphere because we don't have technology to export.
Okay, so currently countries are buying from Russia and China. Post-AF, why do countries buy from the US instead?
There's a few reasons. First is that we have new tech. So the evidence, I think it's the Ladislaw evidence, makes the claim that the reason we aren't able to export tech is because we don't have any reactors to offer. The Gaddy card also makes the claim that we already have relationships that are
Where in
eroding.
this Ladislaw evidence does it talk about like reactors?
Maybe it wasn't the Ladislaw card. New tech spark new frontiers of conflict. Oh, wait, no, that's the
Yeah, the Gaddy evidence is talking about
Yes.
how the America, so it uses the conditional statement, if America retreats from civilian nuclear field, then revisionist power like Russia and China will be able to claim that power. It's like a forecast and prediction.
Oh yeah, sorry, it was the Graham card that I was talking about.
7 case. Let me know when you get it.
I'm good.
Okay. Is anyone not ready? Just everyone's good then. First off, speaking misinterpretation, plain text need to specify protection action, plain text violation, they only clarify the object of protection without any specifications, what protection varies between that's about our first limitations, reading resolution between three lines, on topical mechanism for protection, explode the topic second, and incentivize the action, or fitness, get out links to cover keys and companies for airlines, which are predicated off of action of protection. Next on sea options, water resources, the water and fountain fresh and packaged surface and groundwater, so sea oceans, UN3, water resources depends water fountain fresh and packaged surface and groundwater packaged within the national territory, the water oceans, open seas, excluding violation, nuclear plants pollute directly in the ocean. Verse 11, what is the radioactive material dumped to destruction of ocean nuclear plant, completely release radioactive waste directly to the ocean water, use of reactor course go into the sea, but for particular limits, our interpretation incorporates all waters and American for U.S. jurisdiction and control, exposed to caseless and next projects, obviously, permitting increasing to make larger, greater, change to make larger, or to make larger, greater, the opposite of increase, decrease, protection means permanent or prevention, collision 20, under the CW protection, not being prevention means permanent, slender, water, 7 pack water, associated with layers of reducing impact violation, and increase permanent, better, limits, or anything else. Something explicit top and text links of court errors makes not promote tenable. Next on the advantage counterplan. The United States federal government should stage increase the use of bioremediation cleanup, nuclear waste fuel, and subsidize substantial increase in exports of nuclear energy at a low cost, substantially increase funding, implementation, research, and development for green negative emission technologies, including on limits to the implementation of biosphere, synthetic trees, and circular wetlands, study, capture, carbon dioxide, methane. This has potential to dramatically reduce global emissions. Pascal 18. That's what relates to different role living countries and safer research initiative having a number of boards, special offset carbon emission taker, how the areas carbon savings that's available, deputy safely scaled down, including reforestation, forest management, practices, biology, or direct air capture, and normalization of research investment is needed. Next topic is the need for the United States federal judiciary role. The United States federal government only substantially increases water protection in relevant areas of nuclear power of the United States after environmental impact assessment conducted by the Council of Environmental Quality 1978 regulations. The United States federal government on substantially increases water protection in relevant areas of nuclear power of the United States only if it satisfies an environmental impact assessment conducted by the Council of Environmental Quality 1978 regulations. Regulations can be state 20. A federal Republican you can completely use a variety of governmental dramatic areas, a range of federal action subject to the pandemic care rule, solution for the agencies not to consider cumulative indirect effects that harms those such as countries' role in reducing agency's obligation to obtain additional information to rule as it reasonable and workable time and details to rule within our alternatives consider from agencies who rule alternatives of judiciary agencies jurisdiction and equal with political sustainability and extinction is called under the environmental organization but upon environmental situation you may have become matters necessity to feature the role of environmental problems require international action for international cooperation and provide comprehensive featuring about creates foundation for unified national effort to regard as a constitution for the environment. Next, optimism not the optimism is high traffic and property accelerate growth with data is confidence key customer. It's been 476,000 jobs in January. Show recovery the business have been the economists in the White House expectation for labor report incentive will rise up earlier. Estimates remain optimistic. Job openings is a touch on worker level hiring is good for the economy. Effective business during the event passes overall improvement accelerated pace after that commercial while these easy and environmental regulations got business confidence crushing economy cost location and rental businesses started 18. Regulation deals pollution with the complex certainly we're very especially problematic for small business because of incur fixed costs, easing regulations that keep protect business confidence, protection capital, spending on most supports production process and higher expenditure investment and improve business investment with the ground rate that water pollution industry be complex and linking bureaucracy incurred high cost of very limited high cost of compliance and emerging companies listening are actually competitive. Post-COVID economic rebound spiritually global dominance, the alternatives global conflict, the last China's authoritarian dominance. Campaign 20 there was a global that promises cheap global consequences for the EU rights to what the EU for daily leadership and global disaster recovery can determine whether the EU allows signature Iceland public recovery relates to seats for long-lasting to China being the United States regaining leadership as a convening leadership as a convening power base for 7 years is likely to be China. Next off the oil TA. Sanctions by Russian economy to the brink under the exports from total glass until late 223. Third of federal law sanction bill, quick not capital because business having prepared as well as Russia still rich natural resource boon areas just have Putin has been actively seeking Venezuela Russia from the West also the being a company Russia has used the money for sea for oil and gas export development substantial financial defense and also has significant reserves about 500 billion to the levels of this financial power, however, may well be blunt ban on the Russia issue Twitter sovereign debt and goodness of focus on Russia provides 20% of the EU and 20% of its gas and energy efficiency means domestic LNG surplus will be offloaded to Europe. That's key to Curtis 21. The US is given a net export or a net LNG export of renewable electricity already even if gas share the US power and US can never produce gas LNG surplus gas and will offloaded to Europe. US oil and gas trying to for European countries increase their capacity to receive LNG more LNG advice into US Europe. We rely on Russian gas LNG we use as a tool for US foreign policy. US gas imports or imports are inevitable Russian European imports 2 years ago. And Russia economic plan has a global war class to state and EU separatism, terrorism, populism. That's conflict. 16. We will distracted with masses Russian powers. The Russian heavy case in the US foreign policy become created that just in the mandate of the EU for working at global levels so like will be appear desperate to find other rules only given the absence of institution to the rule that rule has Russia to fragment that result of separatism to also global jihadists who would take advantage of provoke conflicts in NATO multi member states for something that the EU's division NATO as well were told by nationalist movements case. Nuclear power doesn't solve climate. Most recent studies, Carbon 22, nuclear should not be considered a solution to climate crisis. Nuclear is never the most very public said. Potential risks of positive green harm not just feasible. And war doesn't cause extinction. They study for how 20 pounds of remains in main journals, and South Leaf Nuclear House are possible, much less extinction. Original will be less carbon intensive growth, reduced moment healthy by 5 forecasts. Worst case are likely there is uncertainty. Citizens world on track for 3 degrees. And other factors are all cause and increased U.S. emissions. And warming is essential to the course are relevant, and their evaluation is backed by science. So can you there? Tony Collins companies essential is misleading is the notion that's a level warming for which warming consultants standing is not the level works typically was a low grade warming for every common existential global warming plan welfare of the survival of species or entire species which was missed projection etc. And the link between climate change and war. That's Article 15. You discuss strong evidence academics reaching the different conclusion for good case and resolving good excluded key studies for resolving included studies that actually background of prior archaeological evidence for civilization for 2 years ago when they were removed as a connection was weaker than the evidence for early races will be increased in interstate warfare work for that other forces not important probably an extra time. Okay, it's all countries the US doesn't export to. France 18. CNT across some instances, de facto orders of foreign policy, but rarely the over location such as oppressive regime converts of visas, the American city as regulators, or if it means defense minister policy objectives include lower standards for Russian and Chinese companies that be another commitment parental for the US and demand for Chinese and Russia is lower, or demand for China is lower, transitioning to other sources like 2017, that can largely on China's control because by blocking transparency, Chinese companies into the inability to manage or then alternative models of government delay decision making, global interest, nuclear energy experience, and will probably question about China decision to invest in export market, environmental coaches, and political decision heavily in the evolving trend that cost more near issue is highlighted by the real projects and no impact on nuclear problem where nuclear states produce peace. This is 1815, but of course there's no linearity can come with international multi-linearity between progressives and the relationships between the non-linear overall. The opposite series of eroded energy to create increases the dispute state ratio that number of military interstate disputes decrease the cosmic theory of this various affecting the global optimization between nuclear as long as no evidence of new nuclear states decrease conflict. Nuclear weapons no extraneous effect on the public analysis over the public provoking effect nuclear proliferation is possible proliferation because conflict of assurance that level empirics to be led up and John 2 for causal and systemic empirics to attention and US naval superiority always a couple of foods too large for other countries to catch up even if other countries could catch up isn't because Germany anyway when we say on Highland 18 I'm taking this as a well big example forward it seems about China Germany nothing is true the sort of US 60 allies China's one US GDP compares favorably to China's the US and no project for China's even though the civil budget of Navy size and Navy use remains way ahead of the China's seafaring vessels are on average of sharing the size of neighboring public capability New York City Yakko carry firearms so this is what this formidable armada the to deliver use the size of every numbers US Navy combined advantage of at least twice to China's let's not overdo let's not talk about only or obsess only about the one potentially misleading metric in military capability we need to 1% yourself in a physical and great power terms we're still way ahead and CW is on the counterplan. CW cell climate change sequester carbon and methane for counterplan wetland loss becomes at all costs. Roughly 16 wetlands are abundant carbon have the highest carbon density among the soil system factor rate wetlands oxygen 2021 countries can check wetland systems have high capacity to sequester carbon to long term which are wetlands unsaturated soil or part of unsaturated soil. Once that's sent out, y'all want us to send it out before process starts. I'm good. Okay, I'm good.
Okay, you're good?
Mhm.
Okay, vagueness, how much does the plan have to specify?
You have to specify an action taken by the AF to increase protection. For example, in the case of like our AF, it specifies the protection will be clarifying the decision in the Maui case, which is an action of protection.
Okay,
Another example could be an AF that specifies it would like close the Halliburton loophole, like a fracking AF that does
that's
that.
fine. The oceans, you've read a card, your violation card is about like plants in Britain. Where do you think you have?
No, it talks
violation?
about it's actually about nuclear plants writ large, and it talks about how they discharge into the sea. So any coastal sites in the U.S., like on the east or west coast, would like also apply.
Okay, where does it talk about the U.S.?
It talks about how plants work writ large.
We can read more evidence about the US.
We can read evidence specific to the U.S., but it's also safe to assume that if this is how coastal nuclear plants work in other countries, coastal plants in the U.S. work the same.
Okay, that's fine. The advantage counterplan, actually status of the counterplans.
Conditional.
Can you kick blanks?
We think it's theoretically legitimate to kick blanks.
Okay. So you can't. Will you can't like? Okay, you can. Yeah, it's fine.
What do you mean?
The-
We kick
I don't know.
Yeah. The
NEPA counter plan, how does, like, one thing of, which evidence do you have that says one thing of NEPA like spills over to all the other?
Yeah, that's why it specifies the federal judiciary. We think using it codifies it in law and sets a precedent. It'll be used in future environmental actions.
It's not just like the fact that it uses the federal judiciary too, it's about like the actual counterclaim text is about like, it's a precedential, it's about like the CEQ regulations and whether those regulations go through. If the NEPA review is done without the new CEQ regulations, then the judicial legitimate, like the precedential effect of that would be that those regulations don't go through.
Okay, so whenever there's like a case through NEPA, then like it causes.
Well,
NEPA
it
to be
specifically has to be NEPA using the new CEQ regulations because the state impact center 20
That's
evidence
fine.
is about how the
is-
current form of NEPA is bad. It makes a
that's
comparative claim that we should revert to the new.
That's fine. The BizCon disad,
Mhm.
can you explain the link to?
Yeah, sure. It's twofold. One is that the sergeant evidence talks about how anytime there are new regulations, businesses have to work out if they apply to them, which forces them to spend a ton of money litigating, researching into those rules, and temporarily prevents them from making new investments because they have to sort of test out the scope of those new regulations. We also think that the AF would have.
Yeah, that's fine. The oil disad, why does the AF trade off with Russian oil?
The Keating and Garris 21 evidence is actually pretty specific. It talks about how we invest in clean energy, or when we invest in clean energy, we then have a surplus of oil which we export to Europe.
I have a
It
question about
specifically says
Is
the more LNG
is the
advised
scenario about, oh, we can take a break for that, hold on. Is it 10 minutes? Yeah, okay. Is the scenario about oil or liquid natural gas?
It's specific to liquid natural gas.
Okay.
Sorry, I called it the oil data. It's about LNG.
Stop perhaps. That's good.
Where's my mouse?
Oh, wrong. All right, so
In the wrong room?
yeah. I think the order is going to be in the one at but I'll repeat it just in case. It's the advantage, vagueness, solutions, permitting, the advantage counter plan, the CEQ or environmental impact assessment counter plan, the liquid natural gas disad, and the BizCon disad.
Okay, can I get that in? So advantage,
Yeah, advantage, vagueness. T oceans. T permitting. The advantage counterplan. The CEQ counterplan. The natural gas cassette. And this condensate.
Okay, sorry, the order of the counterplans, I have everything with that.
Yeah, it's advantage and then the CEQ counterplan. Is anyone
the,
okay? Alright, y'all good now? The 1 and 2 drop the SOI impact, which is safe for proliferation, means we have an external scenario that's dropped. Russia and China will export. That allows them to expand their alliances, which risk conflict with the United States. So nuclear war, nuclear energy solves climate change. It's a clean resource that is innovating and becoming more and more efficient, which means that emissions are being reduced, but it also allows us to transition renewables in the long term. There are evidence has no warrants. Doesn't account for new innovation. Yeah, yes, climate change causes extinction. Grave evidence says that it causes a 1-2 punch, whereby 2 natural disasters hit the ecosystem, which collapses their natural resilience. That means that we can't survive without the biosphere. And their evidence is just saying that there are no models showing climate change causes extinction. Grave is one and offers multiple warrants for how this is true. Yes, there are tipping points, but the tipping points don't have to make climate change self-sustaining as long as we're polluting those. Tipping points are deadly. Other actors are solved by U.S. exporting nuclear energy, which is sufficient to solve existential war. Climate change causes war, disrupts states by causing refugee flows and making resources no longer accessible, which causes war. NPT solves other countries' proliferation, which means we don't, which is hard doesn't apply. Yes, Russia and China and demand is expanding now, even if it's not, if they're not exporting it to everybody, they're expanding it to new powers, which will risk NPT collapse. The training evidence says that when two powers are proliferating at the same time, there's a unique risk of proliferation, which means the Suzuki evidence can't account for that. The critical evidence is that the mad rationality don't prevent it because of the destabilizing forces of new proliferation. Naval superiority is not the same, it's about nuclear naval superiority, which is distinct because it allows us to control conflict. Their card is about naval superiority being inevitable, not that involves nuclear weapons, but the planet's key anyway. Vagueness. Mechanism specification is just vagueness with a different name. Orientation is that the plan must be topical and crossix tags a highlighted advocate specify the mechanism. First is we meet the plan. Text specifies increased protection water resource, which is a distinct mechanism. 2, arbitrary unpredictable shifts the goalposts and slightly more debatable in terms of fairness. 3, no office generic counterplan. This has a case to apply the plan. Text includes resolution language because all resolution distance apply for reasonability. Crossfire from T to 5. Our tip cells are often sea oceans. We meet the plans as water resources. All of our cards are only about water resources. If there are ocean resources, we don't protect them, but all nuclear power also believes freshwater. We regulate them on that basis. If there are ocean nuclear products, we just don't protect those. Plant text cards and crossings determine plans. Mandates alternatives are feel aggressive, leads to unsubstantive debates because it's T every round based on the negative interpretation, and it's unpredictable because I don't know what the next going to interpret the F does. Permanent. We meet NRC 21. NRC is to determine whether an application to construct a light water reactor meets requirements to issue a permanent counter protection means prior harm prevention to come to protect the means to regulate or prevent use of the resource apply to regulate no way making over the cause of adverse effects of the protected resource by regulation of activities to itself prefer one ground the permit. They say they're only for private landowners and concedes its power of states. It shows them with half ground and no over power states counterplan 2 precision no and to define their author is placing protection in plain terms for their firms banking clients. 3 arbitrariness permit is a single mechanism of protection but is not exclusively the topic there. Cites section 4.4 of the CWA. That section lists 9 different regulatory mechanisms and even concedes RR CWA no data protection provided through conservation easement land management restrictive covenants federal integrated natural resource management plans. 4 net ground RR links harder than 1 instance permits and 9 real linking is 4 full functional limits literature get treated better than artificial 1 6 reasonability good is good enough the advanced care plan. Perm 1 to both 2 do the counterplan 3 to the planet every combination of flanks links that benefit BISCON by forcing bioremediation hampers growth and investment in exporting nuclear power expanding nuclear industry. It would necessarily include expanding the nuclear industry which links into the natural gas stuff. The first plank does not solve, at least it does something to an increase in new cooling technologies even if they get rid of waste, which means it doesn't allow us to adapt to warming. The second plank does not solve. It needs we need to have the industry in the United States to achieve economies of scale to make our exports both technologically more innovative and cheaper than Russia and China, which is necessary for us to compete. The CCS is a moral hazard. Looks like corporations off the hook. They'll burn more than sell the carbon, which results in the increase in emissions. Consequence that's 20.
Carbon capture acts as carbon keep oil company captures CO2 and cell, which injected into oil fields to produce more. Companies use carbon capture to deflect action well. That's why they take more export profit, highly risk of carbon removal to carbon blue oil industry have access in. Manipulate the tax regulatory process. Oil companies inject CO2 into rocks. Gas states for the rest can be removed. According to tax or above demand. If the companies have captured to DNA, also the products are longer. Investment directly in tail more. Fossil fuel limiting emissions. The company produces large volumes of natural gas. The tech or work with the companies have not plans. Sell the CO2 to bolster oil production. This car evidence in the YC also says the CCS is not scalable enough for nuclear. It's preferable condoms and better dispo solves A straight turns back to the Bruce's critical DPB fairness ask. Can't beat all ideas ever match and see contradiction of Brits. Best we see answers. Also, if the CCS is a natural stuff, when those plants are chopped down inevitably or removed, that releases the CO2, or when they die, that's just a natural process of photosynthesis. The CU count plant. Purpose 1, vote 2 to the count plan, 3 to the plant in the process of an impact. Then vote after the best policy option includes all other demands of the plan. Counter to our plans must compete off text and function maximizes. Germane comparison of ground and input reason to team 4 to the plan. The impact and assessment of water resource text is below certainty is key 1 innovation regulatory system versus energy and activity tanks investment and implementation now 2 investment samples and certain complex process source investment pressure. Implementation is uncertainty date and spend policies and possible predictive shifts and varieties delay ashore. However, policy uncertainty stuff like growth challenge investments into buildings energy efficient assessments value becomes trended policies essentially the complex process. Tested different laws impact on certain policy dispositions interacts with green department good activities. No challenge, there's no spillover between one impact assessment and more impact assessments for that. If they have some sort of function that they change, then we can read that. Now, impact the card just says environmental problem specification leads to one air impact in the block. Nuclear doesn't trade off with natural gas. Allows gas to be used in suitable markets. Partner, diversity and electricity is critical. Grid nuclear can play a key role in baseload energy. Let's just support the increased use of nuclear power. Enhance field diversity, best use of the gases, and becomes the basis of increased use of nuclear with a lot more gas being used directly in the market where comes to led to the way in increasing efficiency. No trade markets, large enough. It's not. Yes, actually, Tesco prices approved natural gas policies to nuclear is not stabilizing option. Schellenberger, 19 natural gas prices spike or contribute to inflation line. Prices took people by surprise declining. Processing low to get to gas so stored move. Flooding oil prices could rise even more. Supplies will remain tight until 2024. Depleting inventories lead to volatility. The impact could be devastating. Non-unique Russia or Putin has already invaded Ukraine, which is what their scenario is about. It also proves that the impact is actually flipped on his head. When he has those resources and an economy, he can launch an invasion. But if the natural gas declines, one of the resources go to war. Putin will divert Churchill 22 diversion. Does not apply to Russian wars. Rescue war must pay off. Putin is not in parallel. There's swapping and jailing, assisting and rigging Russian soil as full intelligence, military cowbots, oligarchs. Any new scenario justifies the impact. Business confidence is myth. Blackstaff 18. Feelings will take the economy. Myth confidence is one-sided poll of a handful of people views of business about as much as they have views of everyone else. Systemically compared, confidence of reality, like a lack of correlation between growth and confidence. Turning climate investments via rule will boost investor confidence. 20 investment rule is shared with how growth rate. Turkey will come investors boosted investor confidence in some way. Investing in clean tech projectors spark significant uptick in new investments efforts. However, fragile energy sector survive. Come down to no link firms looking based on Boku after one bad news cycle. They will prioritize the most profitable endeavors first. Recession is likely. Rate hikes and Chinese slowdown. Lockman 11 recessions coming to Fed. Less than monetary policy burst. Credit bubbles based surplus on low rate pressing on Chinese housing or credit bubbles would spill over to the global economy. No credit doesn't back up. In 1918, prevented the wars ever have declining. Price been less than defense, less likely to participate in disputes. We measure power by share of GDP among great powers. The theory is a systemic appear to observe between great powers. This must be viewed the climate change levels for responses appear the exception rather than the rule. Go back to the natural gas stuff. Where's the? Oh, wait, actually, I know this. High prices cause war bundle. 18 aggression oil. High prices cause aggression. Oil flushes states with confidence in cash to military adventures. Iran's oil fund. Hamas and Hezbollah spending by one producer can fuel arm races that make this calc likely. Iran Iraq war in 1980 prime dynamic. What's up here? Decline tanks for aggression now. Appetite for military modernization. Pavis 20 Russia needs $40 per barrel. Even with cuts and reserves, there are a few other options. Budget will less than pay for foreign military adventures. Russia is they will survive by adjusting the budget. Those will mean pausing their expensive aggressions. Not to mention developing new weapons aimed at the U.S. Despite great front, the pain was evident when signaled Russia wanted to join conferences for Russia today. Losing guns. I think.
Yeah, you would say that real quick.
Where is that? If I can just combine it. It's in your sanctions. Okay.
Under impact. Yeah, we don't listen up to under impact.
Yeah.
One of the ATE.
Okay, it's up.
Okay.
I'm ready for crossword.
Yeah, cool. I just wanna make sure. I'm good. Okay, yeah, cool. I got it. Okay, the climate investments via renewables boost investor confidence. Renewables, is that including nuclear, or do you have to win that you help other forms of renewable?
No, for the function of the data evidence, like nuclear would be included in that. We use this for referring to clean energy technologies.
Okay, why are investors excited by that?
Well, so the Bannock and the other piece of evidence brought up in 1AC describe how investors are uncertain about their investments in nuclear energy and which energy should invest in now because they know that nuclear is required to resolve the climate crisis, but they also are uncertain about whether there will be sufficient water resources and
Okay, so
adaptation
for-
within the industry.
So for example, like the infrastructure bill put money into renewables just through like increased investment, that didn't solve why, how's the plan staying?
Multiple things. First of all, the infrastructure bill spent almost nothing on renewables. The reconciliation bill, which never passed, was the one that was spending on renewables. The second argument is that our cards are specific to nuclear energy and about the sustainability of the industry. So even if they're making investments, if they don't have the water in the long term to make the industry sustainable, it doesn't matter.
Okay, that, I get the argument you're going for there. On the advantage, the way you saw the climate stuff, what regulations are nuclear energy subject to post-AF they aren't subject to now?
Sure, it would change the regulation that they're subject to. Right now, under the NEMA Act, they are required to implement certain cooling technologies. The AF would change that to no longer require a certain technology, but would rather adopt a tech-inclusive framework that requires them to reduce their water pollution and water use to a certain level. We think that that would allow them
Okay,
to
is there
implement new
one
technologies.
standard water use level, or is it different for?
No, it's a standard.
It's a standard? Okay, does it scale with the size of the plant, or is it just like
What do you
one
mean,
province?
scale with the size of the planet?
I guess I'm not asking that right. It's just like their standard, I'm assuming it like changes though based on the size of the plant, or is it like legitimately there is one level for each plant?
It's scaled to the size.
Yeah, scale the size of the planet. Just like water resources in the United States. If this is the oceans violation, we would not apply that to that.
No, just legitimately, I'm trying to like
Okay.
understand what
Yeah.
draft does, or like just like understanding what's going on. I guess transitions to other forms of renewables. What about the AFs versus interests? Are those like the second answer to the turn? What about the AFs versus interest in other forms of renewables?
That's not the argument is that the transition to nuclear would allow us to kind of reduce our carbon emissions in time to also allow transition to renewables to be.
What about the AF makes people interested in other?
And that's not, it's not, argument is that renewable transition will occur in the very long term. They will not be fast enough to solve warming absent nuclear allowing that shift, which is what the Sankara evidence is
Where
about.
do you think you got evidence saying it occurs in the very long term?
The Poman and Sankara evidence.
Sankara evidence, you said?
Yeah, Poman and Sankara, the first two cards in the nukes advantage, or the climate change scenario.
Okay, that I get what you're going for. The CEQ counterplan, the deficit about like innovation. I guess how does the counterplan link to it?
The card talks about how uncertain climate policy makes investors wary. The whole regulation process is not this concern.
Okay, start prep, 10 minutes, starting. I'm proud, 7:32 left. I'm gonna do that too.
Gotta mute you. Bro, what is wrong with you?
MJ said she liked it, Jack's tag.
I thought it was pretty funny.
I love that tag.
Which tag?
It doesn't really make that much sense, but it's fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make that much sense
That's fine though.
relevant to the card, but like,
It'd be good for a psychoanalysis card.
Oh, wow.
Oh, is that not what it was for?
No.
Yeah, you dropped our implicit psychoanalysis claim.
Oh wait, that's a card in the one he's.
Yeah. I really like it.
Okay.
It does not make sense in the context of like decreasing investor certainty.
you like tagged that, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I like read the card, I'm like, I don't
Not
understand
sure
this
what
tag.
you're going for there. Okay, well, the order is gonna be T Oceans, the NEPA counterplan, the advantage counterplan, vagueness, the advantage.
Could you do that one more time, please?
Yeah. T Oceans, the NEPA counterplan, the advantage counter plan, vagueness, case. Where is it? Is everyone good? Cool. I'm not sure why they did why they blew up the T oceans definition when that's the best T term on the topic. And we have a good violation to it. Our interpretation is that the water resource includes a continental fresh and brackish surface and groundwater, but excludes the oceans. That's a UN 3 evidence. They can see the interp, which means that as long as we win that they don't meet, then you have to vote negative. The first argument about them not protecting the surface of broad statement, the plan tech that they cannot access any sort of plan text in vacuum argument because the plan says water protection, not protection of water resources. The word resources does not appear in the plan. Obviously, water includes the ocean, but water resources does not. And we have read evidence that differentiates between the two things. Their burden is to point to a card in the one you see that excludes oceans in the one you see under their interp of defining the plan by cross-checks and cards. But we also think that is bad, that you should define the plan by the plan itself, because anything else is arbitrary and unpredictable, incentivizes vague and contradictory solvency advocates. None of their evidence says that it's only freshwater, which is obviously their burden. Crossing said that they do cooling, and the only one I see card that actually discusses water says that the plan institutes integrated resource planning for the use of water in cooling. That's when I say cook it all 21. Availability of water that equal to resource and temporary power that depends on power will remain important for for cooling nuclear plants. That's an important framing issue. When Crossing said that the two types of regulations that they introduce are on thermal pollution into water and on intake of water for cooling. That recut says that intake of water for cooling is from the ocean. That includes the oceans. That's the IAEA noted. Nuclear reactors in the United States use water from the ocean for cooling. The other thing is about thermal pollution, which our 1 and C violation says goes into the ocean because of the discharge of nuclear waste and thermal pollution goes into the ocean. The cooling takes it out of the ocean. The outtake, the sort of outtake puts it back in. The only other argument that they made was that it also includes freshwater, but I'm not sure why that matters. It's obviously extra topical. Extra T is a voter because it justifies spiking links to DA solvency deficits to the app, etc., and arbitrarily kicking parts of the alphabet, which makes going for T impossible. Independently, it lets them read infinitely unpredictable offense and new advantages and forces us to win T and substance in the 2 and R, which is an impossible burden. I'm gonna extend standards just because just so that there isn't any standards, but they haven't afforded an interpretation of the topic, which means that you cannot you have to default to our interp. There's a limit to anything else, including the ocean specifically proliferates the topic through multiple entirely new categories of apps, each requiring a new set of generic strategies in the case types, including MBA's apps anywhere in the ocean, Arctic apps like drilling rights, coastal apps about reefs, treaty apps like treaty apps like the UNCLOS one, sailing apps like Salt Lakes, fresh apps, your Alaska military apps, your UN, US territory, naval base, and any environmental drilling, pollution, or conservation related app permitted by any location in the ocean. The list goes on and on. Limits need to come first. Water protection is objectively a good idea. There's no top D, and we don't have maximum force agent specification, meaning we don't even get politics limiting out the ocean preserves continental DAs like federals and EPA trade-off while simultaneously giving the negative a little bit right in case tags. They can't cross-apply functional limits because they don't solve, which I did on the limit standard above. But limits proceed since we still need case tags and generics on this topic. Specific solvency advocates or solvency advocates don't check because you can find a solvency advocate for anything on the neither. We're taking the counterplan that their approach to successful competition and that there is no offense on the flow. There is a reason to reject the argument of the team on the advantage plan. The counterplan also comes to the case well, when it links to the DA, I'll explain each link one specific deficits. If you use a solvency through the lens sufficiency deficit in the impact and charge case, they win offense or permanent, but it still links to that benefit because it still includes the regulations of the app. The line on say backing they didn't have warrants for shielding, so don't give them one new in the 1 yard. Heard the counterplan suffers the entirety of the app, which is obviously a voter. Doesn't link to that benefit because of the government does by remediation. It's not regulation forcing the companies to. We solve nuclear pollution.
that's 7421. Geometric clean up every aggregate that awaits cells make a protein pollutants in the uranium drilled, traps uranium mineral form, preventing material form from the environment, mobilize uranium liposaccharides, soak up uranium like a sponge, remediate pollution, recycling, reclaim the scarce metals, entry, protecting the scale vesicle, that are productive living factory for vesicles, pull metals out of the water. We solve exports, chemical fields, an increase of exports at a low cost. There's zero reason why countries wouldn't buy from the US because they're just looking for the lowest cost, which the chemical and fiats. We solve warming, the energy solve, that's apocalypse, carbon mineralization, reforestation, bioenergy, CCS, etc. all sufficient to solve warming. The CCS card is our word because it lets us emit while still using fossil fuel technology without any environmental harm. Otherwise, other planks solve. Trees solving we only need 250,000. Their evidence assumes normal not synthetic trees. That's BBC News 3. The synthetic tree can be planted on Earth 250 worldwide. That can suck up 22 million tons of CO2 produced annually. Bubble solve. That's working 11. Best carbon percent of you returns estimated we will only need 4.8% of one like offset current CO2 forcing this is well reach using existing materials and read alongside existing capacity 0.1 and your really take particles are split we now said current global warming. The CW solve climate change. I'll finish that part. That's right. Say it all at 16. The surface of atmospheric evidence of the environmental vitals and anaerobic evidence of bacteria produce storage and mitigate climate change. That solves the root cause of scarcity, which solves any of their link turns to the DA. That's fact 19. Climate change impacts the world's water progression supplies over second war water negatively affected water supplies of the American west southwest and southeast get already become reality. The intense changes that we use water at higher temperatures increased demand for the water. The counter stuff is good, but we don't get to its economics. First, background. This is the topic for debate. Topic is huge, and true dates are not unique to rare percentage and unpredictable atoms, etc. Means we invent all our often level playing field segments. Obviously, construction can see from multiple angles and viewpoints. There is two AC strategies. Two AC strategies solve certain atoms and conceding contradictions, straighten net benefits. All solve plus use double because BT and case turns and dispo. It doesn't solve our offense. Where there's because background is linear counterpoints would need the same net benefit and encourages teams reading cheating counterpoints if the alpha has to go for substance. On to case. There's no terminal impact of warming, even the worst case scenarios can explain extinction. That's an order how 7 is economic growth and innovation means that tech is less carbon intensive, already reducing climate mortality by a factor of 5 in under a decade. Adaptation solves that's hardwired all. 17. Warming solves can cause extreme universe several the low probability of extreme levels and possible to say whether the warming would become severe enough time scales, meaning humanity is able to adapt to avoid extinction in very extreme scenarios. All other than their warming that they don't have an impact to disaster. I answer tipping points above the thing about the climate change causing wars. Obviously, not true. They don't have any part that ties migration to war or resource conflicts to war, which they would need to read on the sphere of influence scenario. The zero scenario for experts because the countries buy from whoever sells the cheapest energy. The app doesn't decrease U.S. prices. Countries, if anything, it increases U.S. prices because it increases the cost to businesses. The countries don't give a shit about new reactors or safe tech. Otherwise, they wouldn't be buying from Russia or China in the first place, which means that there is no offense on that. I actually do want to go back up to vagueness because I want to answer this interpretation of how the plan works. Cross-sex is a terrible standard because the result is that you don't specify anything which is proven by this. Cross-sex solvency advocates would say different things, and sometimes reading competing solvency advocates, which is proven by this debate that they just wouldn't answer questions on cross-sex. It forces us to learn what the app does 3 minutes before sending out the 1C, which obviously Dex probably can't solve any of our offense on the ground standards above. That's cross-applicable to debate.
Okay, ready for cross?
Yeah.
Alright, first on that T page, what is, do you think, the interpretation of the way that we should determine the mandates of the alpha top count?
Plan?
The plan?
Yeah.
Okay, so your argument is essentially plain text in a vacuum.
I think plain text in a vacuum is a weird sort of formulation of it because, like, obviously we have to determine what the words in the plan mean, but we think that we've defined water resources as something distinct from water.
Okay, and what was the violation on extra T?
The argument about, like, the argument that you made that was like, as long as we include fresh water, that's enough to be topical.
Okay.
Because it would still include oceans, which justifies ocean
on
gas.
the counter plan, so the remediation stuff, who does the remediation?
Government?
The government, how does the government do the remediation?
What do you mean?
Like, okay, the private nuclear energy power plants have the waste. How does the government like clean that up or bioremediate it?
Like agencies would go in and do the processes that would clean it up. They give the tech to companies, they'd subsidize it, or agencies themselves, like the EPA could actually just like send in people to go do it. I don't really know what the
Okay,
question is.
the export stuff.
If the question is whether it's a regulation, no, we do not force businesses to internalize costs of bioremediation.
The export stuff does, so the plank subsidizes the cost of US exports of nuclear energy.
That is included in the plan, yes.
Okay, so does that plank do anything else, just to be clear?
The plank fiats an increase in exports of nuclear energy.
Okay, how?
The government would subsidize companies producing it and then subsidize other countries buying it.
Okay, so
Because
you subsidize
So
production.
the government would basically, it would pay for both sides of the transaction, which means that people get free energy and companies produce energy. And like companies still get the money from the government, we pay for the
With
buying.
songs and stuff, carbonization, reforestation, bioenergy, CCS, any other climate investments?
Sorry, what was the question?
Besides the four you listed, carbon, mineralization, reforestation, bioenergy, CCS, are there any other investments?
Those are the things that are discussed in the PACLA evidence. We also read evidence about constructed wetlands, synthetic trees, carbon, like a layer of latex bubbles on the ocean, etc.
Okay, so the only plank that does not do some form of CCS is the bioenergy stuff.
I don't think that, I think lots of those are not, I mean, obviously bubbles is not a form of CCS.
Okay, that's fine. We'll start.
So bless you.
Listen. Okay, I'll send the one in our out now then. It's gonna be the oil DA, the, BizCon DA.
Just for clarification, that's like the LNG stuff.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. No worries. I just want to make sure I'm on the right floor.
Here, can you pass me that, Sid?
Yeah.
Thanks. Are y'all getting the doc?
Mhm.
Cool. Get the.
You said LNG and then Viscom.
Yeah. Okay. I think everyone's good to go. Please stop me if you're not. Oh, yeah, I can see they don't link price spikes and stuff for the impact of the Shellburger card. They'll put them on to where it takes out the impact, uniqueness for the impact, and their link term, so they can't go for a straight term. Physical DA, slow recovery, the facts rise to extinction, EU collapse, nuclear exchange, or China emerge. That's going to be for time frame determined who turns to and intervening actors of decades to solve the turns case one. The impact will conflict eliminates the impetus for nuclear power sharing and exacerbates every environment impact by factor through nukes, missiles, and wartime production. The second is a link cause of a extreme so let's see, they're all I can't solve. Grade 21. Environmental regs result in higher costs of water productivity lead to shift lesser allocation costs and exceed the benefits water regulation requires a permit for discharges. So switch your regulation the Southeast instead of the slab and permit to growth. Three, one, they say this month's amend high stone is key to growth one to invest in clear future outputs, specifically post back turns, economy with added team business confidence leading indicator future output, especially during downturns, business confidence control cyclical plays in for a role forecasting downturns. Business confidence leads U.S. business investment growth, one of the major components of investment business confidence predictive power for total investments also trajectory of investment here. Stock price forecast recessions, business confidence, investment commit future habit growth. Second, self-fulfilling prophecy lit up. 10, optimism, healthful economic growth, pessimism, contributing best other decision, do something positive, spontaneous search, actors, people like your influence by what they think other people would do, customers, start to figure out banking on other deposits in the job, macroeconomic student confidence and influence of future economic performance, expectation, higher productivity, boost consumption, investment, and relative to be 3, study through its reverse causal decrease in business loads and economy, lowers 14, performance or business confidence, impact performance, or growth studies in the business and consumer confidence, reinforce confidence being likely influencer, and investment in employment growth figures, business confidence, and place level growth because under decrease or investment in purchases. 4, high business confidence, accelerates every other economic indicator. It should be 17. The state of spike in consumer business confidence, feeling based pressure, translated, accelerates spending investment overall, and market trends. 2, they say the renewables turn 1, sequencing issue, renewables are emerging market, and most of the link term will be increasing security for long-term investments are impacted by short-term growth. That's cafe secondary link terms explicitly about government investments in clean tech, not new regulations. We agree. Different 20, climate finance investment can boost incentives for something. 3, way the link zeros is because it brings investors and businesses want to invest. And 4, the counterplan sells the link term because invest in nets. The 2, C3, they say the link yes rate or yes link 1, the rights link. That's the target of consumer relations, increase uncertainty for businesses, litigate new rules, process rules, enforce new water loans on companies which they have to litigate to find out what the loans are, calculate how to meet them, and spend money on them to meet the new standards. The link is linear accumulates more, representing more costs. Off has 16, environmental regulation, restricting trade solution, impose a cost of the market, increase time of monetary cost of businesses, the number of regulation, increase cost will continue to increase accumulation regulation norms, the economy, reduce entrepreneurship and innovation costs, the years significant effect on aggregate output, productivity, physical output, and reduce the growth rate of output, the more regulation leads to slower economic growth, and compliance costs also of innovation cuts businesses low. Has 16, opportunity costs of regulations, loss productivity, because scarce resources have to be allocated to comply business by time, more money, compliance rather than innovation, and flexible regulations, cycle innovation, general out of economic design, market-based policies, and not necessarily mean desired economic design regulation, difficulty to keep in practice regulation, offering aggressive burden, disproportionately falls on the can produce user incur greater costs and cost pass along consumers at higher rates. The second is ultimately blue regulations, squash investment, making investment business at risk averse by MBA 21. For instance, transparency or essential to enable businesses to grow, especially in uncertainty policies, deliver customer requirements, specialization, job creation, financial person, open exchange of program by stakeholders in the private sector, consisting transparency is fundamental and implementing policy over the requirements of regulation, where on owners requirements of liability, liability, indemnity, and investment accessory regulation, under the recovery mechanism for Americans to navigate the rules. And 2, C4, they say recession is coming down, but Lechman is comically old. It's evidence that's prefer evidence that's 4 months more recent. We're talking about the state of the U.S. economy. We're on track for home recovery now since Ukraine, Omicron, rising rates, but keeping the highest key lane 3, 4. You decided for 678,000 jobs and the unemployment rate dropped to 300% power stronger, but the growth would be power strong, but the growth of the server always like this. We can be optimistic on certain has not taken the air, cannot take anything we're going to recovery can give this for but everything negative improvement of all the several promising software industry still recovering from the Omicron was seeing rapidly required to workers succeed. The labor supply significantly which like much key growth, healthy image demand, slows in Ukraine, rising rates, and low investment consumer confidence are all up creating options in recovery. Commercial 2, 3, and is picking up as recovery tries funding, feeling optimism will boost growth, increase loans in 2021, start to generate optimism. People start making investment out of growth, business media or loans to invest, major spending loans to go because consumer confidence, spending really confident right now, consumer confidence, and PSI
I have something for you to read, so can you just make sure?
yeah, sure. And PMI ratings for ISM 2-1. PMI fell to 57.6 from VA compared to forecast of 57.5. Indication for labor resource supply delivery performance remains optimistic. 2 5 they still impact, but their impact uses supply. McDonald's about declining powers lashing out. Campaigns about U.S. growth being key to turn Chinese economic hedge. The impact is about Russian Chinese revisionism in a world where the U.S. can't restrain them, not the U.S. lashing out because it's declining power. Is this one case?
No, it's on T, I forgot to answer reasonability.
T, rather forgot to answer reasonability. But for competing interpretations, 1, reasonability, categorize all reasonable topics, magnifies the length of limit. 2, our standards for are reasonable. 2, are arbitrary. 3, substance highlight is wrong, predictability, partial solves, but they didn't read an impact to it anyway. Scores, reasonability is a way to compare interps. They don't have an interp, so there's nothing to compare it to.
Oh, and then on the DA, they dropped the EU impact account.
Oh, they also dropped the EU impact account, which isn't about US/out, so it's an external impact.
557.
Sorry about that.
No worries. You're not apologizing to me. I don't think you're. I just realized.
No, I was apologizing to everyone, including you.
You read through the ISM card under recession coming, right?
Yeah, I think I read up to that card. Let me double check though.
I believe the ISM card.
No, I read SRD 21, but I didn't read MM 21. No, wait, sorry.
I think you just.
I
the
read ISM 21. Sorry.
Yeah, that was the last
To
one.
be clear, that was the last part I read, nothing past that.
It's definitely true.
Yeah. Okay. If you want to combine. Okay, I see the block. Alright, stop right at 36. What is it? I was trying to drag and I think it's the whole thing. Alright. Did you see that? I can see the words. Actually, my Dropbox probably sent it. Sorry, I dragged it onto there and it like went through the, there we go. Alright, it's sent. Can I see sent?
Is everyone good for an order? Alright, advantage, T oceans, vagueness, advantage counter plan, this stuff. What is this?
Can I get that one more time?
Yeah, for sure. Advantage, T, the counter plan, and then VisCon.
You included vagueness in that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, vagueness is after T, but it's like the same. Yeah, same stuff.
Okay.
Wait 1 second. It's, so advantage or
Advantage, T, vagueness, counter plan, VisCon. Good?
Yeah.
I see you guys opening it up, so wait just a second. Just let me know if you have it up. Good? Alright. Anyone not ready?
We'll concede there's no terminal impact to warming, but we have an SOI scenario that outweighs that says yes, there's a scenario that first is that Gaddy says that there's relationships, which means they will buy from the US, but if we're stepping back right now because we don't have the tech. The second is the Graham evidence, which says that new tech is key to attract those countries to buy from the US. Third is that it reduces the cost, and fourth is that the Gaddy part says that new tech allows us to export to those countries. That's key to establish non-proliferation standards and prevent Russian and Chinese SOI. If the SOI scenario turns this out, which I'll get to there, the T debate. We'll concede that the plan is the best way to determine it, but the plan includes oceans and excludes oceans because it says in the U.S. Indian inclusion and action must occur within the United States Freedom House 12 Indian indicated inclusion within space, and this excludes anything that is not the continental U.S. or an island, even if the U.S. exercises jurisdiction color code to Catelli. 16 determine the United States to contribute not only the continental United States and it does not include territories which the United States might exercise jurisdiction, for example, the sea follow outside the definition, even though seas might be within jurisdiction and not within the continental United States. In the United States only refers to the 50 states. That excludes military bases and unincorporated territories and pretty much the entirety of the oceans. The U.S. Fifth Circuit of Appeals 15 incorporated territories encompasses destined for statehood. There may be places within jurisdiction of the U.S. incorporated extended citizenship territories because those persons are not in the United States. In the U.S. military base not in the United States. Philippines was a territory was defined to hold that a military base qualifies as such a court decided the territories of the United States is limited to states of the Union and express geographical limitation and for predictability. It's the Supreme Court definition, which is the most predictable, unpredictable, and terms lead to infinite endless expressions and prevent clash. There it limits debate. Doesn't matter because it's an interpretation about United States. Now the vagueness stuff they didn't extend to offense, but I'll extend that the vagueness is arbitrary. But we should hold it. We should do it to the plan text. But they didn't extend vagueness. But it takes out. But they don't have any vagueness offense because they can still determine what the 1AC does by reading the solvency advocates and asking a cross check. So if solvency advocates mean that they have more than 3 minutes to check, and the way that the rounds play out allow them to understand it. The advantage counter plan, I'll go for two solvency deficits. First, the Gaddy card, which says that new tech is uniquely key to allow us to export to other countries. They don't fund that; they only fund the exporting of those technologies, not the creation of those technologies, which means they aren't able to create the new tech to export. Second is the Cook evidence, which says that without adapting to water scarcity, we aren't able to create the new tech and create the ability for the exports. But I'll send turn to both. We get new shielding warrants because they newly articulated the counterplan. It justifies shielding businesses. Don't freak out if they're told that they're going to get paid if they to comply with the counterplan and plan, which means that they don't freak out. But water causes shutdown. I'll answer the warming stuff. They don't solve warming because they consider the CCS stuff. They just said it lets us emit without consequences, but they emit more. This exacerbates the scarcity, but we don't have to win that scarcity is worse, just that it's happening and their stuff is too far off. They said root cause of scarcity, but there's less water. Less water is key to low water dry reactors, which is key to the exports and key to the technologies. The VisCon did said there's no turns case. The offshore stuff doesn't matter because we're not going for an environment stuff, and the impact doesn't turn because we contain the impact. We definitely presume the impact because the SOI, so the only thing that emboldens the lash out. But they also conceded the impact. They have conceded the Pappas card on the other data that says that Russia and China won't lash out even if they're they won't lash out, which means that doesn't happen. But Gaddy means that we have the tech to stop that. The investor confidence links are just what I'm going to go for here because they don't have any.
On the offshoring stuff, the Bandic evidence says the nuclear industry likes the regulations.
Bandic says they like the regulations, which means they aren't going to offshore, and because they create new technologies which allows them to be more efficient. Go to meetings first. Recession is likely. All of their evidence is about the current state of the economy. It doesn't matter if our evidence is old. It's about structural claim. It's a structural claim about how the economy is going to collapse. They rate hikes guarantee recession. Lee 12.7. Inflation spending common insurance. Low probability that the Fed will take recession without a recession in summer season. 40% chance of a recession entering. Soft landing is difficult in inflation. There's better. And then 50 for 20 days. Second for stagnation. The efficacy of the pandemic. The everything bubble will burst. Lockman 12.2. Bubble from permanent low rates for everything that it does hike rates. Cities bubble will burst. The world is more indebted in a way that the important unregulated non-big sector of the economy is over leveraged this means and likely that if today's bubbles was to burst what economies have a hard landing, the on-track stuff that says that if growth doesn't collapse, but our evidence says that it's going to collapse inevitably. The loans and PMI stuff don't matter because it's about causing collapse in the long term, but they don't have any specific evidence to nukes while we do. We have the banding evidence which talks about investor confidence that they don't want to invest right now, but the regulations create new tech which allows them to invest in that is specific to investor confidence in the nuclear sector, and the only evidence in the round that is specific to the nuclear sector on the dissent, which means you should automatically prefer it for the link story to the dissent.
Okay, we have 7 something. It's on the page somewhere here.
Without the chat,
7:30.
it's not hard to remember.
Okay, start chat. Okay, there is gonna be one question. Or, I guess I'll just wait for-
Let's get rid of that.
I'll write down what appropriate last time, I just wrote it down, I think it was like 220, but I don't remember exactly what it was.
What's up?
I forgot to write it down right after, and then I just remembered, I forgot to write it down, it was like 220.
I have no clue.
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't really care. The streak of strange debates continues.
What do you mean strange debate? What are you talking about?
You know what I'm talking about. I read a negative turban. What the hell?
No, the worst is when it's like the one that sees like 10 off, and the block is just his turns.
Like head bad? We did.
No,
we did
that.
We've
I'm
had
not saying on
this.
mine hates debates, but it's like if you're gonna go there, why were you?
I'm pretty sure y'all did that against us.
It's so much fun to do that though.
Oh, it's great. Maybe not for the judge, but.
At least you know.
No, with us, you're more likely to get like 40 interviews. I really wanted to extend vagueness. That was upsetting. Like, it's such a fun time.
Cool. Someone's not happy. Jeez.
I sent that card. The order is T, and then the advantage at the bottom.
Okay.
Actually, I guess it's the DA at the bottom of the advantage.
So T, the advantage, and the dissent.
Okay.
No, just T and then the DA.
Okay.
I got yours last time? Okay, cool. You got it. Yeah, if you don't look, it's not much. It's just one card.
Yep, I dropped so much there. Whatever. Is everyone good? Cool. They have conceded our interpretation of water resources, which is that water resources includes continental fresh and brackish surface and groundwater, but excludes the oceans. That's UN 3 evidence. They have also conceded that we both agree that the plan text defines plan action. Plan does not include the words water resources, but rather the word water. We have made a distinction between the phrase water resources and the word water in terms of their scope. Water includes tons of things, including the ocean, that water resources does not include, which garners us a link differential, or limits differential, and a violation. I'm going to do a brief extension, an extension of the limits impact, but they haven't extended a standard in the context of water resources because they don't have a competing interpretation. Which means that even if I don't win any offense, you have to default to my interpretation because they don't have another interpretation of water resources. They link to limits because the oceans apps include a litany of different environmental pollution, apps, drilling apps, etc., and any of other geopolitical apps, because we have territories up by Alaska, we have the sea up by Alaska, which is super close to Russia, and accesses a bunch of geopolitical advantages. Even if you start with even if we only access a little bit of the ocean, which will be later on the flow on there in the U.S. it still means that apps can access spillover claims to the rest of the ocean, meaning that it's functionally the same topic. That makes being negative impossible because it massively expands the topics and decks our ability to write case sense and access core continental generics like EPA trade-off because they don't have authority in the ocean. That means that you definitely default back on the question of interpretations. You don't give them these new cards that they have, these new definitions that they have read because they are entirely new definitions and not counter-defining anything that has been defined by the negative or responsive to any argument in the 2NC that was new, which means that there's no reason that the 2AC couldn't have read those cards. That matters because it incentivizes sandbagging your best arguments to the 1AR, which makes being negative impossible because the 2AC shapes block strategy. I would have gone for a different argument if they had read those cards in the 2AC, but obviously I wasn't able to make that strategic decision in this round. They don't have a justification in the 1AR, which means that they don't get one new in the 2AR, again, because it causes sandbagging the late-breaking debates, which inevitably favor the app because they get to speak last. That makes all the predictability arguments that they do that make it at the bottom irrelevant, and it doesn't take out one to see it because we still have it in the context of any of the ocean being included, which I'll do a little bit more on later, but it's irrelevant anyways because you have no offense against our interpretation, which means that there's only a risk of negative offense. Reasonability, they consider that it magnifies the link to limits because it combines all reasonable topics and that it's super arbitrary and that there's no impact to substance crowd. Extra topicality is a voter even if it includes some freshwater because it justifies no linking out of DAs and spiking out of solvency deficits by including non-topical action, which allows the app to guard your infinitely unpredictable offense and forces us to win T and substance, which is untenable to an R. It's a question of models, which means that even if they weren't doing that in this debate, you still vote neg. The violation was conceded in the 1AR. The recode of the Cook evidence says that the app would incorporate changes in water cooling. The EIA evidence says that water cooling includes taking water from the ocean, and the 1NCU violation evidence says that water in the ocean is also polluted by nuclear energy. The only way out that they have is maybe if you consider these 1AR cards, but they don't, they're not relevant because under their definition, they still don't meet because geographic U.S. and states include 12 miles of the ocean, which still includes some of the ocean. That's saying one. The term in the United States, in terms of geography, means territorial seas. This includes enclosed areas and sea within 12 miles, which is still saltwater, which means that it still creates a differential between the limit that in the U.S. sets and the limit that we have established underwater resources, which means that they are still not topical. That they can't go for no link to this card because the card is about the same way of defining in the U.S., which is where citizenship is, as the cards that they have read in the 1AR define, which means that they can't get out of that because it would be super unpredictable. I'm not going to do the case stuff. Plantex and vacuum, the Plantex is written wrong. If they want to go for Plantex and vacuum, the plant increases water protection, not water resources. Water resources is a term of art that doesn't mean the same thing as water. Gut check. Obviously, like water from the water fountain down the hall is water, but it's not a water resource. Our intro creates a distinction between those two things. It's not a semantic decision. What the ocean's definition is the most important T definition on the topic, and we have one violation that has been conceded. The 2AR is going to get up and grandstand about how this is a techie distinction. It's not. U.S. nuclear reactors draw heavily on ocean water, include into the ocean. We have one conceded violation and a conceded intro. The 1AR arguments don't get them anywhere, and you shouldn't wait on them.
220 equals.
So you want a card doc?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just about the card back from our last round.
Oh yeah, we should probably do that because I just have to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have to do that.
Yeah. Oh.
Fifth circuit.
Interesting. Let me see. I feel like
That's what, oh, shit.
Yeah.
Keep like that.
Just beneath that.
Oh, it's right there. Oh, thank you.
Clearly, we're all rusty with the person who made it.
Yeah, yes. Okay, the order is. Okay. Is anyone not ready? All right.
This is a very easy F ballot on we meet the most of the 2R does not matter because we agree about the definition of water resources, but the planned text inclusion of in the United States is what wins us this round because it means that we would not regulate nuclear power or water that is outside of the bounds of the United States, and we will win that the definition of in the United States that debate should use does not include any part of the ocean as per 3 cards read in the 1AR. This the only 2 arguments they can win on are that our interpretation somehow includes this one, it does not, and that you should reject this 1AR argument. I'll extend our definitions first. The litmus test for topicality of an app is the plan text. Both teams have agreed to that. The plan text says in the United States, which means the protection would only occur in the United States. That excludes any regulation on ocean water or nuclear reactors that pull from water not inside the United States. I'll walk through our cards defined in the United States now. The first random house card says it has to be inclusion within space. The Kohler Gatelli card clarifies that according to the district for the Supreme Court, that is defined as, the DC district of the district courts, defined as only the continental U.S. islands and other U.S. possessions. That does not include any territory or region the U.S. has jurisdiction of, which is what the ocean is. So the islands, the continental U.S. islands and possessions like Guam or what are included here, but not any part of the ocean or saltwater. The Kohler Gatelli card explicitly excludes seas, which means the oceans would not be involved. The U.S. Fifth Circuit of Appeals card expands on this and says that it's actually very specifically the geographic region of the 50 states. That the Supreme Court had a case on citizenship in 2015 and concluded that any sort of territory or possession outside of the United States or that it's not in part of the 50 states would not defer citizenship, which confer citizenship, which is what they have agreed to, is the standard for how we're determining in the U.S. The standard for determining in the U.S. is where citizenship is applied. The Fifth Circuit of Appeals, citing a Supreme Court decision, ruled that citizenship only applies when you were born in the 50 states, which means in the U.S. only includes territory in the 50 states, which means that that would exclude any ocean water, as per the Fifth Circuit of Appeals, because it's about a geographic region, which means that our interpretation meets their our plan text meets their interpretation because we would not affect ocean water. Yeah, the citizenship question, several answers. First, our card is not, the first card is not about citizenship, which means even if you evaluate this, we still would be under the Kohler-Arcatelli card, but we meet under citizenship. The second, or the only argument they have is that the card they read is citing our case. Our case was, or their card was in 2001, our case was in 2015, and is citing a case kind of overturned precedent, which means you should automatically defer to the U.S. Fifth Circuit of Appeals card, which is what we've read as the most recent ruling from the Supreme Court. They dropped our predictability impact, which means you should default to the most predictable interpretation. Ours is from a federal court. Theirs is from an immigration attorney, which means, and ours is like the most recent Supreme Court case, which means obviously it's a question that the only hope they have is that you just flat reject this argument because it's new in the 1AR, which is multiple answers to. First of all, is that just a framing issue. Obviously, 1ARs deserve leeway. It's the only way for the affirmative to come back from the block. It's a new block explosion. The 2NR solves and allows for the negative to catch up, but it's also the standard for not a new argument checks back against any of their offense because this is not a new argument. We meet the block. We said we meet their interpretation, and we extrapolated that in the 1AR, which means it's not a new argument. Second, they made a new argument in the block by distinguishing the standard for topicality between plan and function of the act. In the 1NC, the violation was a card that said that nuclear power pulls from outside oceans outside the U.S., which, as articulated in cross-6, was a violation about the function of the affirmative. In the 2NC, they stood up and said it's about the plan, and Rhett made the distinction between water resources and water, i.e. that our plan text did not meet, which should obviously justify a new 1AR pivot to answers that apply to that. Otherwise, the 2NCs could do exactly the same thing they're complaining about, which is sandbag their good offense. Gene, anything else?
Just like we did say it was justified.
Oh yeah, also the whole argument about this being new, they did not say like no new arguments on this question in the block, which means obviously Gene could not have anticipated that.
Well, also, like, you get to answer their new arguments about why it's not justified.
Why it's not justified. Also, questions about topicality should be granted more leeway because otherwise it leads to like substance exclusion. If you can just like it's different between a dissent and a topicality. Topicality is what it's actually good for debate, and dissent is what who's like evaluating the plan or whatever.
Just the violation cards don't matter because it's about the U.S. They haven't defined.
Yeah, violation cards don't matter. It's about in the U.S. Yeah, that's good. Good debate.
Good debate.
Good debate.
Wacky.
What do you mean weird debate?